Welcome to Our Voices, Hastings State Hospital. This is a series that is co-sponsored between the Dakota County Historical Society and the Hastings Community Television. It is funded in part by a grant from the Minnesota Historical Society from the Legacy Funds. We're very happy to have this opportunity to talk to people who have worked and or lived at the Hastings State Hospital during its time. So far, most of the people we've been talking to are former employees, and we are also interested, though, in getting the stories of anyone who has lived at the hospital and is willing to share those with us. The hospital itself has a long history. It started in 1900 with a special train full of people, 100 men, who came from the Rochester State Hospital to be brought down to the new facility for custodial care only. There were no treatment plans at that time, no recreation. It was just basically a place for people to live. And through the years, that changed quite a bit. A number of changes took place during that time, and we've been hearing some of those as we visit with people. So today I'm happy to introduce 3 former employees at the Hastings State Hospital, and I will start. We have Jeanne Horsch and Mark Wright and Mary Hagen. And Mary, let's start with you. What was your first experience? When did you first become familiar with the Hastings State Hospital?
I started at Fergus right after high school for
Fergus
a few
Falls
months.
State, that was a state hospital
And
too.
then I went into nurses training. And when I worked for a year at Glen Lake and then came back to Fergus Falls, and at that time I started bringing people down to Hastings for lobotomies.
Okay.
It wasn't a great number that we brought, but I think I brought maybe 2 people a week for, 6-8 weeks apart.
Mm-hmm.
And they had their surgery, and then I returned with them to Fergus, and they went in a special program called Total Push.
Okay.
And you had very high-level people working with them. It was not all that successful. We did have a few that did get back in the community. And I can't even tell you how many people had, I don't remember.
How many had the lobotomies? And
had lobotomies, so
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember just that.
Do you remember much about that, the surgery itself, and what it was like taking the people back?
I never worked in the operating room.
Okay.
The healing process was quick,
Mm-hmm.
The change in behavior took time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And some of them returned to, I can just recall a few that really stood out. The one lady got her ability to play the piano back, and she would go to church downtown instead of out at the hospital, and she eventually went home.
Mm-hmm.
And there were others that made improvement, but maybe not quite that much.
Mm-hmm. Not that dramatic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then when did you start at the Hastings State Hospital?
They were building the new part, and it was going to be open in 1950. And of course, they were looking for help, and Dr. Lightbourne offered me the job to work on the new building, and I accepted, so I transferred up.
Okay, so you went right from Fergus Falls to Hastings at his
yes.
request. Mm-hmm. And what was your position when you first started
Head
then?
nurse on the receiving units.
Okay. What would your typical day be like? What would your responsibilities be doing?
Oh, it was to make sure we had enough staff and that everybody was taken care of, and the needs were met and the ward was kept up.
Mm-hmm. And that was when they built the new main building. They took down the old main building that was there.
Right.
And did they dismantle all of that, both of the wings and everything? Do you know, and just build No, they didn't?
I don't
Jeannie?
think
They
so.
did the center.
Okay,
Just
just
the
that
center.
big, beautiful center that,
Yeah.
and then they left the wings and then built that other,
The wings are still there.
and those are still the wings. Okay, I wasn't certain about that, so that's nice to have that cleared up. So those wings that were built in 1902 or 1904 or something, I think, are the ones that are still surrounding the administration building. Okay, that's nice to know, because they're still being used
Yeah.
today.
It was then they started bringing in
Okay,
patients.
yes.
And they came from other state hospitals,
Mm-hmm.
primarily Rochester, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But up to that point, it was all male.
Mm-hmm. And that didn't last for real long, did it? That they kept the female
Oh,
population?
oh yeah,
Oh,
they were
okay.
there when the place closed.
Oh, I thought there was a time that they brought women for a while and then they went back,
No,
but that
no,
was
no,
maybe
they
before.
came.
Okay, all right,
And then we started admitting them right from the community or,
okay.
local hospitals.
So it wasn't just transfers anymore. You did your
Well,
own.
not all later, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The first transfers were kind of a relief of the number that maybe Rochester was overpopulated, so we took some.
Okay. Great. Well, we'll come back to you and more of your
Okay.
stories. Let's move on just to Mark and find out, Mark, how you first became involved in the Hastings State Hospital, what year and what you did.
In 1957, we'd had a 56. We'd had a hailstorm and kind of affected my farming. So I was looking for a job in the spring of 57, and a neighbor kid was working out there, and he convinced me to go out and apply. And of course, they hired me, and then I was there until they closed.
Okay. What type of training did you get for?
Oh, we had
For your-
Mrs. Schultzen's own for pretty good, surprising when I look back at it.
Yeah. So you had to go so many hours or something, or
Yes.
was it? Okay.
Yes.
And what types of things would you, where did you work? What cottage or ward or where?
7 below the hill. It's gone now.
Okay.
And then I had a military break. And when I come back, then I went to receiving, where I think I was there 17 years.
Oh, okay. Was receiving was in the main building?
Yes.
And was that on the first or second floor?
Second floor for a while, but we had so much trouble with runaways from the elevator that we finally moved to third.
Okay.
Because then we could key the elevator to third, and it didn't keep coming up there and opening.
Sure. Now, did you, were people there for a long time in receiving, or would you just get them
Usually-
and then they would go off into the other wards?
Usually, that's the way it was. They weren't there too long. Occasionally, they were.
And so what types of things would you do on your job, typically through a day?
Take them down to the dining room for 2 meals on the morning shift. Take them out for exercise if they were able to leave the unit, but the unit was locked. And just be there.
Do basic care and
Yeah.
make sure that everything was taken care of. When you first started, were they already using a team with the doctor, the psychiatrists and social workers and all that? Did you have the team that you
Yes.
worked? Okay, so that
But-
was in place in the 50s.
Yeah, but as I told you, I remember the Thorazine when we had it in big jars, and many of the patients, this is down on 7, when I started, and shortly thereafter, the behaviors changed so that you didn't need to use near the restraints that you did before.
Okay, well, let's talk about restraints. Some people have said that all the restraints went away after Governor Youngdahl passed, that there was a Mental Health Act, I think, that was passed in 1949 that forbade the use of restraints. And so were they still being used at times, periodically?
I never saw a straitjacket until we transferred a patient to Sauk Center School for Girls, and they come out with a straitjacket. That's the first one I saw.
So Hastings didn't have
But
straitjackets
we had,
when you started?
No, that's correct. But we had leather restraints on the receiving unit for people that were terribly upset.
Mm-hmm. And how would those be used then?
We'd have to get a doctor's order to strap them to the bed.
Okay.
They were like cuffs, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And ankle too.
Yeah. And they were leather, so they
Yeah,
weren't.
and they were lined.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And you could only leave them on so long.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. We'll come back to you, Mark, for more. And Jeannie, how about you? When did you first start at the hospital, and how did you get there?
Well, I'm from Red Wing,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I took my training and schooling. And I was engaged to somebody that lived in Hastings,
Ah.
and he was still going to radio school after discharge from the Navy, and he
Mhm.
didn't have gas money to come down, so he said, why don't you come up to Hastings and get a job,
Okay.
which I did.
Uh-huh.
I worked at a local hospital for a while, but it was kind of different than what I was expecting, and it was just small, you know.
Mhm.
So then I decided to try the state hospital. That was about the only other thing
Mhm.
in town.
Yeah.
And I started out there.
Well, great. What year was that?
I think it was fall of 48 or 49.
Okay. And
Probably
so
49, I think, the spring
49.
of 49. Maybe.
okay, and so you had your nurse's training in Red Wing?
Correct.
Okay, and then you were able to practice. And as a nurse then, where were you first stationed, and what types of?
I think my first assignment was helping with insulin shock.
Oh, let's talk, tell us a little bit about
Okay, I don't know if we had maybe 6 or 8 patients on it, and they would be brought over to a special unit that we had set up.
Mm-hmm.
We would give the insulin according to the orders.
What?
We would give the insulin according to the
Oh,
prescribed dosage.
oh, okay, so there were
Then
different
they
levels.
would go into different degrees of shock or coma.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would monitor them every 15 minutes, check their blood pressures and pulses and make sure they were okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then at a certain point, the doctor would come and take them out of it with an IV glucose solution.
Oh.
Then we would keep them on the unit, make sure they ate dinner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was in the morning. It was a morning
Mhm.
treatment.
Okay.
And then they would go back to their unit.
Mm-hmm.
That was, I
And-
think, one of my first assignments.
And how long did this process usually go? Was it all morning long?
Yeah,
was
it was
couple
quite
hours
early,
or-
and then they'd be out about 11. I think, I can't remember for sure.
Mhm.
We served them dinner, and I
Mhm.
think I told you there was no forks or thing. They had a big metal spoon, a metal
Mhm.
cup, and a metal plate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they probably had special diet for them to make
Mhm.
sure they got the right replacement, you know, fluids and
Sure, to fill
food to take care
their
of that
body
morning.
to take
yeah.
care of that insulin.
And we do that 5 days a week.
Oh my goodness! So quite a few people. What would be a diagnosis that would lead to someone having that insulin?
I think it varies.
Therapy.
There's some schizophrenics. I think mostly schizophrenics, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm. And then, did you ever have an occasion to follow up with any of these?
No, I
People,
worked
so
strictly on that unit. with
Okay.
Then the next time, I came back there several times to work
Mm-hmm.
because of the pregnancies. I had to. They didn't give they didn't give leave for pregnancy, so you had to
Right.
resign and reapply.
Okay.
And then I worked on the lobotomies, like Mary was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I circulated in the operating room for the lobotomies.
What does that mean? You circulate?
Well, there would be a scrub nurse who would be right there with the doctor at the table and hand them
Uh-huh.
instruments. If she needed something, I would go and get the supplies
Oh, okay.
or whatever. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I was also scrubbed and sterile, but I
Mhm.
did not assist the doctor. I was circulating around the room
Sure.
to get things. Kind of the gopher.
Yes. Okay. Uh-huh. What was that experience like? Did people sort of respond in the same way as they did with the insulin shock?
No, it was
There-
different. It
Oh.
was different. They were
Mhm.
they became more regressed, I believe. Right there, we had to retrain them more.
Oh. Uh-huh.
And what we did, what they had set up was, they would do 6 a week, 2 on Monday, 2 on Wednesday, 2 on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And these doctors from this Twin City area would come down, not one on each day, so there was 3 doctors that were involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason Mary had hers come down from Fergus was we were closer to the metro area, and it was
Mhm.
easier for the medical staff to travel to us
Oh, sure. That makes sense.
than to go way
yeah.
up to Fergus, so we got them from
Mhm.
the different hospitals.
Mm-hmm. So that they weren't all just Hastings patients.
No,
You had them coming
no.
from other areas
Correct.
also. Mhm.
And then they would have to go through rehab training and Some of them almost retrained to eat, but I can't remember that.
Yeah, we did. Was
To walk and eat, and there were some of
Yeah.
them.
Oh, is that right? So they would regress that much that you would. Hmm. How long would that usually take, Mary, or what did it depend on the person?
Oh, gosh, they. I remember working with them for, well, at least 2 years. You know.
2 years?
Yeah.
Oh.
Really intensive for like
Yeah.
a month or
Real
6 weeks.
intensive.
Mhm.
Lots of help. Lots of expensive help.
Where would they be? Okay, so when they came back, because you had this experience at Fergus, we'll just go there with this. When they would come back, would they be in like a private area by themselves, or did they go back into their ward and then have to
No,
have
we
someone?
we had a separate unit
Okay,
that we kept them.
sure, because they would require more care than,
Yeah.
for instance, Mark and this, being a psych tech could give them in the ward.
They were also
Okay.
a separate unit when they were at Hastings.
Oh, okay.
They were all kept,
Mhm.
in a certain area.
Oh, and so they would stay there until they were
Got
able
special
to.
care and special help, yeah.
Until they were able to move back into their community
Mhm.
setting. Did you ever have any people come back to your units, Mark, who had a lobotomy? Or,
Oh,
or
I
weren't they
saw-
doing those anymore when you
I saw
started?
them on the units, but with the scars,
Mhm.
but I didn't really deal with it.
Okay, all right.
They called them buttons.
I didn't
The
know they called
buttons?
them
They,
buttons.
yeah, they would
Oh.
do two
Uh-huh.
drills and take a
Yeah.
little bone out, which was the button. Don't
Oh.
lose the button,
Uh-huh.
and replace it when they got through.
But some of them didn't get replaced.
No, some of them
Because
got,
you could see the sag in the skin.
well, because they broke, the
Oh,
buttons
I see.
crumbled and
I
broke.
see.
Oh, sad. Yeah. Okay, and then so from there, what did you do next then, Jean?
Oh, I can't tell you in what order. I helped, I worked some nights in supervision where I would do the rounds of the whole grounds.
Mm-hmm.
And that would entail going and counting all the controlled drugs at night, making sure the medications were correct according to the record,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure if any staff needed help, I got them help. If they had any sick people, visit them or call the doctor if we needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
That would be like nights. So, and then in the morning, if there was, they gave electric shock.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, I don't know when we started, but we used sodium pentothal to put them to sleep so that it was a little bit easier for the person, the patient.
Mm-hmm.
And I would set up the syringes, mix the pentothal and set it up for the doctor so when he came, he would have his prescribed, ready to go for the shock treatments.
How do you think, did you ever get a feel of how the patients felt when they were, like for instance, when you were taking them down or when they were coming in for these treatments? Were they frightened? Did they know what to expect? What do you think it was like for them?
Some I thought were very frightened. Some were relieved, I think, that they were going to get help. It was just a variety, I think, of emotions with these people.
So it
But it wasn't long ago, within the last 5 years, that one of the ladies that lived over at Oak Ridge was in depression, and she said to me, oh, if they'd only give me electroshock, I'd come out of it. And this is what had helped her on previous occasions.
Oh, okay.
And she finally got it, and she is living, in one of the apartments over at Oak Ridge, so she's doing
So
fine.
it did help her. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
there was some good to it, and
Yeah.
some success.
Yeah, so, well, those were some of the treatments, and then, Mark, you talked about the drugs coming on, Thorazine and that type of thing. That was
Yeah.
one couple of the changes that,
Oh, that was a
you all
God.
saw.
That was a God bless.
I worked on, I think I told you, I worked on research.
Yes,
With
let's
the
hear a little bit
tranquilizers.
more about that.
I think it was out of the disturbed women's unit where we did this. And the doctors would order we used stelazine, thorazine, and combazine mostly. Mostly thorazine and stelazine. And then we did a evaluation of their behavior. And then we would also see if they had side effects, which quite often happened. And the doctors would have to lower the doses. But that was remarkable how that changed
In what?
the behavior of these people.
Oh,
And
okay,
you could,
so-
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say you could talk to them and they could hear you, you know, what you were trying to say, and they were more comfortable. The side
And
effects,
there didn't seem to be voices in their head
No.
telling them other things, you know.
some of the problems was they would have side effects like Parkinson's syndrome, like with the shaking and stuff. And then some would get very rigid and could hardly walk, so you'd have to lower the dose. And it took a while. They didn't work overnight. You know, it took a while to get them on the right dosage.
So it was your job then to monitor people and see.
I would do the written evaluation report for the doctor. I wasn't on taking care of the people. You know, and I would go and observe them and document.
And did you say that was on the disturbed women?
I'm thinking that's where
What was that ward like? Where was that?
disturbed.
Yeah.
Well,
It was a large unit,
yeah,
lots of people. You needed a lot of help.
a lot of verbalization, a lot of calling names, and a lot of once in a while maybe a fight, you know, and
Where was it located, Jean? On the grounds? Was it in the
it was in the
cottage?
main building on the second floor,
Oh, okay.
east, right? We had disturbed and a semi-disturbed. And then when they got a little better behavior, they'd go to the semi, and then out of there to the convalescent, hopefully.
What would bring? How would these women get into these units? Were they referred? Were they brought in by families through the court, or how would they typically end up in that?
Some of them by court, some of them by families, some of them from other state hospitals were transferred in.
They had what was called a hold order through the court, right? That went through court.
Yeah.
And then many times when I worked afternoons, they would come in by the deputy sheriffs. The family couldn't handle them or didn't want to, or for some reason, and they would come in by law enforcement cars, and they would bring them in to us.
But it would have had to have gone through court, though.
It was it
As
was
a court.
illegal. 3 days you had to evaluate them and decide whether they needed treatment or not.
Did they go into receiving first, Mark? Did you have?
Later years, see, I don't know much about this disturbed women's ward, but we had some real problems with the guys from South St. Paul in the early 70s that had been on angel dust. And the sheriff would bring them in, and they wouldn't keep their clothes on in jail. So they brought them out to us and just dropped them off. And some of them guys were 6'3", 6'4", and we just had a terrible time trying to handle them. And then, of course, they had to be medicated, which required us to locate all the guys on the ground to hold them down. It was rough.
Once they were medicated, did they just sort of calm
Oh yeah,
down then?
they straightened out.
And then would you have like a treatment program for them where they would have
Well, they were in
therapy
crisis, and they didn't need much of a treatment program when you got the angel dust out of them.
Okay.
Yeah,
So what?
times changed when we started getting the drug people, you know.
Oh, after when
Glue.
people came from the
The
drug,
kids had used
scene.
glue. Oh, I can see it yet.
really? Where would they be?
They came
treated.
in on receiving, and then they eventually went out on another unit, you
Would
know.
they be in that? Was there a juvenile? A place
And
for juveniles?
oftentimes they went to other treatment centers in the community.
And we opened up our own drug treatment center.
Yeah.
Yes. And that opened up in the early 70s,
That could be.
I believe.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Yes. So they possibly went into that. Could have gone into that treatment too.
And we had a juveniles area for
Yeah.
a while.
Well, then in the early 70s, we got the mentally challenged.
Yes.
So that was our big,
Big focus after that.
big program there.
Yeah. Well, let's before we go to the 70s, let's go back because both of you and then Mark, you have the 50s memories, but you both have some memories, like from the late 40s and early 50s. What were do you remember the gardens and, you know, people working in the gardens and doing a lot of produce, you know, using the produce for cooking and that type of
We
thing?
used to get, they would bring, when I worked at Fergus, that first year out of high school, we dressed in coveralls and got a group of the residents and went out and picked potatoes. But I never did that again, and I never saw anybody else do it again. It was fun. Oh, it was fun. But they used to bring bushels of peas for us to shuck.
Was
or
that in
beans
Hastings?
for us, to the unit, and we appreciated it. We had something to keep people's hands busy.
Sure.
You
How
know?
about the green beans, Mary?
Huh?
Green beans.
Green beans and peas. I remember that. And we shelled some popcorn. I remember that.
I remember going up at night when I worked once in a while just to get a break, going with the night male supervisor who was on all the time. He would have to go up and make rounds of the pig farm, or the pig barn, the cows. I don't know what else was up there, but the farm, you know, and the barns and such, to make sure it was okay and nobody was trespassing and everything. And that was big, a big thing up there.
It was a big operation.
Yeah.
It was a
They had-
city in itself, almost.
Yes, it was.
And at one time, didn't they also have a place that they butchered some of the animals
Yes, I
for
believe so.
consumption?
They
for
did all their own.
feeding.
Yeah.
And the bakery.
So it was pretty self-sufficient in those
Yes.
early days.
Mark, you remember the root cellar?
Yeah, I looked it up.
Did you?
Did you? Let's hear about the root cellar, Mark.
It's just a big cave.
Uh-huh.
But what I remember when when the hospital closed, the size of the freezer, I didn't know they had this monster freezer that was built in that warehouse addition. And they were having trouble with the motor, so I got to look in it. And then we had to get rid of the food that was in there because they had quite a bit stored.
Now that was
Yeah.
where?
Over by the warehouse and
Oh,
next to the kitchen.
I don't remember that, but
It was all lined with cork.
yeah.
Great big freezer.
And the root cellar would have been to keep the potatoes and
Rutabagas,
rutabagas and,
carrots, onions, I think maybe.
oh, probably.
Because they used to peel the potatoes, you know, leave them whole, and we'd serve them that way.
Oh, leave them whole.
Yeah, they didn't.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes they did, but a lot of times they were whole. The carrots would be, you know.
So it sounds like they had, like the good, healthy
I
menu
think so.
was,
Yeah,
staples were provided.
and their own meat, and then the
And
bakery.
Do you remember when the Mennonites came?
A
And
little
they
bit.
Pressure cooked food. I don't know how long that program went on, but we got pressure cooked food for several months. It was going to give them more vitamins.
Yeah.
And, but they tried, you know.
Yes. There were several programs that I read about where different groups would come in and do volunteer work, and different church groups. Do you think that was one of those? When the was it
That-
Mennonites that came? I thought it had-
Mennonites, that
oh,
would have been
okay.
a church group.
Well, was that the group that would do 2 years instead of going to the military?
Yeah, let's hear about that.
I don't-
Someone talked to me about that
I
just
don't know.
recently.
I
That
think that was.
there was a program for conscientious
That's what it
objectors
was. Yeah.
that didn't, you know, they didn't want to serve in the military. So what they did then was to serve out their time, I think, working in the state
I think 2
hospitals.
years. Yeah.
And so, do you remember that? It would have been before your time, probably.
No, I remember
No.
some of them.
Oh,
being
you do?
Trained. Yeah, I got.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that worked fine as far as I knew.
And what types of jobs would they do
They would be
then?
psych techs. Most of them trained.
Uh-huh.
They would go to the training program. And
The Vietnam War brought quite a few conscientious objectors,
Okay.
and we dealt with quite a few of them on the units.
When you say you dealt with them, does that mean that,
Well,
that
worked
they
with
were a
them.
problem, but they...
No, they were not
you
a
meant they
problem.
were, that you worked with them.
Yeah.
they
You
were
had a s-
employees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
employees.
And so so they would have been employees just like yourself, only they were doing that instead of going to Vietnam,
Mhm.
or in the other case, the World War II. That was an interesting program. I think the state hospital sort of provided a lot of different areas for people, you know, doctors coming from other lands to get their license and some of those kinds of
A
things.
lot of
And-
different lands and countries.
Yeah, when England put in whatever kind of Medicare they had, we had 2 doctors come over and they worked at Hastings
Oh,
because
okay.
they wouldn't going to work under the government where the income was limited.
Mm-hmm.
Remember big wooden ones?
Hmm.
Yeah. Interesting.
You had to learn to understand their English.
Because it was quite
A little bit
probably
of an accent or
very
both.
much.
Some,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they had to try to learn to understand you, didn't
Yep.
they? Yes. Well, Mary, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say there was one doctor I remember from Spain,
Mm.
and he saw all these older parents in the geriatric unit,
Mm.
and he thought that was terrible.
Oh.
You in America, he said, and in our country, we would have our wife leave the home and take in our mother rather than place her anywhere.
Oh.
That was their values
Sure.
of older people. You don't put them in a.
But those people that we got on the geriatric unit had no people, most of them.
That's true.
No people.
They wouldn't have had to be there, a lot of them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they were there.
It was sad.
Mm-hmm.
And there were so many of them, and our help was not that great that we could keep them going. So poor souls sometimes sat there and slept for
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
much of the day,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah. You also, I think your husband worked at the Hastings State Hospital. Is that correct, Mary?
Yes, he worked, he worked in the dairy.
Mhm.
And he worked in the laundry. And then they expanded that to do laundry for all the state hospitals and Glen Lake. And then they took on all the housekeeping. So then he had to buy all the supplies and
Mhm.
all that sort of thing.
And then he would have people working under him that did all the housekeeping?
He
That's a
had
major.
He had
Lot of
a
housekeeping.
group here,
Mm-hmm.
and of course they all had supervisors, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and he would just overlook all 7.
All of the state
Hospitals,
hospitals?
yeah.
Oh, so they did the laundry, all the laundry for those state hospitals and provided the housekeeping, all from Hastings?
The housekeeping, yeah, he
Oh.
went out and supervised
Uh-huh.
and got their supplies or changed their supplies or
Mm-hmm.
checked on what was being used or overused, and you
Mhm.
know,
So that was
Yes.
quite a job.
yeah, he was willing to quit.
Mhm. Well, that brings up an interesting question in my mind. How did were patients ever involved in their own cleaning? You know, if they were in a cottage, were they part of the cleaning task force, or was that all hired cleaning? Do you know?
No,
They
wasn't
help
hired.
clean. They help clean.
They helped. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Some of them just had a regular routine.
Yeah.
They started in the morning and did the same thing for years, I guess. But
Mm-hmm.
the year or two I was there, same workers cleaning the same floors.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the guys going up the farm. They loved it. They
Yeah.
went up that farm every morning, and
Mm-hmm.
you know they really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. Do any particular patients or coworkers, anything stand out in your memory of you know, your time there? Some particular patient or?
Well, we had, when I came, before I think, the doctor was primarily interested in cleanliness and what else did he do? Exercise, you know, that was important to him. And then Dr. Lightborn came in. Then we started getting little medical assistance here and there.
Mm.
and it finally grew. When I came, there was only 2 nurses there, Jeanne and Mrs. Walcott. And no, maybe there was 3. Burl was there.
Probably.
And then I was the 4th nurse to come in. And pretty soon we had nurses all on all units and in supervision. Prior to that, when we had just the men, there were supervisors, there were male supervisors who were promoted for the length of service, you know,
Oh, okay.
no training. But they saw to it that the shifts were covered and people were bathed and cleaned, fed.
I can tell you about maybe one particular patient before tranquilizers, this is, and he would be rambling all the time and just disturbed. And then he would go hit his head against the wall continually, you know, and he just couldn't reason. So then what we would do is call the doctor, and then what he would order was HMCs.
What are,
There was HMC number 1 and HMC number 2, which was had some morphine in it.
oh, okay.
That was a hypodermic, and then I'd have to call the crew in to help me give it a shot. And sometimes they would be put in a seclusion room just to let themselves get out of the confusion of the ward, and we would lock the door, and then they'd give them just a mat and a mattress thing on the floor until they could relax and settle down. But that was not fun, but that was our choice of treatment at that time.
Because they were so agitated? And
Well,
they were
yeah, how can you let
harming
somebody bang their
themselves
head
and-
all the time until
Yeah.
they just get it? I mean, you couldn't reason with them, and you
Have a
couldn't reach them,
concussion
and you
or
couldn't hold them. I
Mhm.
mean, you take 2 staff to hold them
Right.
constantly, and
And so it was just to help them,
just to give them sedation to quiet down and relax. And
yeah.
that was before tranquilizers.
Does anything come to mind for you, Mark? That,
One interesting thing was we had a whole unit with beds about this high for the epileptic unit. You must remember some of them, Mary. It just stands out in my memory
What
because
was that?
the beds were about this high in
Oh, yeah.
this unit for the people that had so many seizures. And then they come out with more and more seizure meds. And then, I don't know, that just was the end of it. But we had a whole unit, a whole
Yeah.
big room,
uh-huh.
probably 15 beds that were about that high.
So people with epilepsy, there wasn't a way to treat them then. They were hospitalized for it, weren't they? I mean, it was considered an illness or...
Well, those with epilepsy got Dilantin and medication.
Oh, could they leave
that.
then once they got that? Pretty much?
Well, I can't say that.
They would still have seizures.
I can't
Oh.
remember that.
But less.
Yeah, and not so bad.
Yeah, they didn't have the seizures.
But not all of them were in state hospitals. I mean, there's a lot of people
Oh,
No.
then that
And when our retarded and or handicapped, mentally handicapped people came in, there was a whole new program set up for them.
Okay,
You know.
but we haven't talked about that with anyone yet. Could you tell us a little bit more about how that group?
Well, we had 2 units, and I think there was about 30 on each unit.
probably.
Do you know where they were transferred from? From Faribault or
Faribault.
from? Okay.
Yeah, and they were taught to make their beds and to do a little work in the kitchen or whatnot.
The goal was to get them out into the community, that they were not the
Yeah.
most severe, and they maybe didn't have to be in a state hospital. So if you took them out into the community and you went through a stoplight, why they just stand and look at it and figure out what you have to teach them what that was about, or the doors in stores, revolving doors or whatever. They had never seen anything like that, and so you
Oh,
had to
we were-
reteach them how to live in the community.
We were excited when we'd take them to the first time we took them, or not the first time, but when we had taken them to restaurants, and when they'd ask for wishbone dressing, you know, we were, that was a plus, boy.
Well, they didn't know how to eat in a restaurant. They had to learn how to
Yeah.
behave.
Yeah. So this was a good program for them
Yeah.
to be able to become
And then
more.
eventually, we got community homes. Some were big, some were little, and 6. And some were maybe 20, 30 people.
And you yourself had one of those homes, didn't
Yes,
you,
we
Mary?
had one. We started in '78. We bought a new home, a bigger home, and Hank was able to stop work and go home and fix that up, so we had handicap everything.
And is that what you did when the hospital closed then?
Yeah, for 12 years. But we took 6 people who were handicapped mentally and physically ill. So there weren't any places in the state for that kind of person, you know.
So you were doing both.
So we took 6 of those.
How did you, were you all there when the hospital closed?
I was.
Okay, and you were? What was that like for you? How did that, working up to that, was that a trying time? Or?
We had to sign a sheet of paper. We weren't, I did sign a sheet of paper that I didn't want to be rehired. And I knew the day they were hiring. I felt nobody called.
I
Nobody
felt kind of
called.
sad because at that point, the state hospital was doing very well. All these people that needed tranquilizers were on it. You could work with them. They went to different groups, and we had personal growth groups, and we had activities that they could, and they enjoyed it, you know. And you would work with them and get them better. And I felt kind of sad because we had to give that up, and I don't think some of them, maybe when they left, had such a help as we were able to give them. So I felt kind of sad. And I helped work in the medical records as we moved those charts out. And I first time realized how many of those young people that were in the alcohol and drug treatment program had died over the, they were young. The charts were there, and they were deceased, and they were 18, 19, you know, just.
During what years were those?
Well, when the hospital closed,
Oh.
and we were transferring these charts and getting them out in the huge medical records area. I didn't know what we had to do. Write down their dates. They were there when they left, and I would look at them and see. They didn't die at our place, but they had somewhere over the years they had died. And some were young, and I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't realize.
So they didn't die at the Hastings State
Well,
Hospital
no.
in treatment?
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
no.
That's what I thought you were saying.
No.
Oh.
You know, Heidi, I don't want us to forget those people that are out in the cemetery, because we used to take care of them, and I don't know if you people ever got called to come down and take care of a body
yes.
and get it ready for a funeral.
I didn't.
I did.
I took many to the cooler,
And
waiting for an undertaker to
we
come
had
in.
to put makeup on them and comb their hair and do things, you know, dress them all up. I never had done that. Only did it once. I only got called once, but it was a young person, and it wasn't easy. And was it Father Legault or Father Quinlan? Anyhow, they made the caskets there for those people. And then Father had a cover, nice looking oak cover for it. And that was put over that pine box.
Oh, okay.
And very few of those people ever had a family come for a funeral. It was us who went to the funeral. I never did get out to the cemetery. I never knew
I
how
don't think
that
we could
was
leave the
handled.
grounds to go through.
Quite a ways.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know how they handled that.
Yeah. And so you helped with that too, Jeanne?
I help with that. I help with autopsies.
Oh, okay.
Not a lot, but, you know.
When they did an autopsy, were they looking to see what caused the mental illness? What
Many
types of things
times.
would they look for?
Many times they would take the brain and send it up. They would get permission to do the brains. You know, they would send it to, I think, the university.
Okay. So, Mark, you had people die on your watch that you took?
I'd often get a call, and if I wasn't alone on the unit, then one person would be, and I had to take the body on a little cart through the tunnel to a cooler over in the basement of one of the wards. And then at that time, they weren't burying them out there. They were waiting for the funeral people to come,
Sure.
funeral home to come
They
get 'em.
probably had families or something
Yeah.
too. Okay, well, in the early days, it was pretty self-contained. Sometimes people would put their loved one, or they didn't know how to handle it, so they would just be there.
Would never have known that when someone dies and they dress them, that they split the coat in the back and just put it, you know, or the blouse. It was a lesson, I'll tell you.
You learned a lot of things out there, didn't
Well,
you?
way back then, people were ashamed of mental illness. And a lot of relatives didn't want to admit or say they had anybody in the state hospital. And I don't think they went to visit them, a lot of them, you know.
How did that work when families came out to visit? Like, do you remember? Did they have special visiting hours? Could their families come anytime they wanted to, or would they go home periodically? How did that? How was that handled? Family contact.
Well, on receiving, we had quite a few visitors because they just recently left the family situation. But I don't remember. I guess we had hours.
Well, during the day, I don't remember either.
Yeah.
But
Early
they had
evening.
they had a room where they could visit.
Okay.
Each unit had a room. And I don't know when they start letting them go on home visits, but we did do that at one point. I don't know when that started. Just like the doors were always locked. At one point, we started opening up doors during the day, and
People
sign
could
in.
come and go.
Yeah, they could sign in and out. That was fun. That was great.
Yeah. So that was one of the changes.
That was a
They
great
sort of
change.
happened
Yeah.
gradually, didn't they?
Yeah. A unit at a time.
Well, between you, you have a lot of experience and a lot of different areas where you worked out in the state hospital, and any other things you can remember that you'd like to?
Well, did you want to talk about my scary moment?
Yes.
Okay. It was on a men's disturbed, and this he was probably in his 30s. He was an ex-boxer who was very physically in shape, but he got very disturbed and more threatening than disturbed, just threatening everyone. And he decided that he could not stay there, and we needed to transfer him out. Well, how are we going to do this? So the doctor ordered some, you could give Thorazine IM. And so we got every man, I think, that was on the grounds.
That was my first fight when I started out
The
there.
site techs,
Okay.
carpenters, the baker, I don't know, maintenance. I think
Oh,
we
this
had,
guy was really,
well, yes.
yeah.
I think we maybe had 10 or 12 guys because we didn't want anybody to get hurt, nor did we want him to get hurt, of course.
Right.
So he's in the middle of this room, and he was a painter. He had his easel up, and he was painting away, and these guys slowly around. And this gal had to give the shots. So I'm standing there, and I couldn't give it all in one area of the butt. I had to give, because it was such a big dose, I had to give it in 2 different shots. Well, the first guy went flying, and the second personnel person went flying, and I thought, oh my gosh, what if I'm here, the last one, standing with these two? But it finally got him subdued and tried to be very careful. And well, Mark said he got, what, a
I had a
leg?
leg.
Yeah.
I hung on for dear life.
And then, but because he was in such muscular man and he was so tense, I had all I could do to give him those injections. But we managed, and he finally quieted down. We could transfer him out. But I was really scared. I've
Yes.
never been too scared out there, but I was.
Yeah. And it must have been very difficult to administer that
It
shot
was.
with that
Yeah,
tough.
and I didn't want to break the needle off, and I'm thinking, oh, dear
Oh,
God.
wouldn't that have been awful?
Yeah.
Yeah, with him moving around.
Yeah.
Do you know where he was transferred to then?
I
St.
want to say
Peter's?
Rochester, but
Oh,
I'm not real sure. I think it was Rochester.
Wow, those things stand out in your memory.
Oh, I'll never forget it. Because and you remember it yet, too.
I sure do.
Yeah.
But that was a rare experiences. But I mean, and there was a lot of female staff. So like Mark, he was called all the time to help here and there. And
Yeah. So you got your share of running to assistance,
I
Mark?
sure did.
Well, this has been very interesting. If you have any other,
I want to
I know
mention
you have
about
lots of memories.
the fact that I don't know when we started, but we had a nice gym in that new section. So really nice gym. And on Friday nights, remember we used to have movies? And they had popcorn, and we could staff that worked there could bring their family out, so I would bring my kids out. And then they also had dances.
I was going to share with you too that, you know, I got married after I moved down here, and of course, those days you could have a wedding any day of the week. Mine was 2 o'clock on Monday afternoon, and we had cake for the people on the 2 units, and the son to the business manager made sure that that was taken care of, and then we went out and visited with them for a short time, and then we went back to the church to be with the rest of the guests.
Oh, so you shared your wedding with everybody
Yeah,
else.
so we shared the wedding with them. And my kids, I don't know how much they remember, but they were a great part of the hospital too, you know.
Sure. With both of their parents working there.
Yeah, coming to the movies, or maybe on the truck driver on his way home in the afternoon from the post office would pick up my son and bring him out, and he'd sit at the desk and color till either his dad or I could take him home. So, you know, our family was really quite a part.
Yeah. That's what we've been hearing from people, that there was a closeness amongst the staff with, you know, all the people that worked there, and partly because there were these activities that, when those movies, was that for employees, or did the patients come to those movies?
Patients.
The patients, it was for them.
We had
And the
a-
dances were for the patients as well.
They had a projection booth up there, and somebody knew how to do that, and he would get a movie, and good movies too, every Friday, I think it was. And then we would have Catholic church out there, Mass on Sunday. I don't know about the Protestant.
Yeah, I usually took a few to Protestant, yeah.
Is that on Sunday too? I can't
Yeah?
remember.
They even had a rabbi for a while, I read.
Sure.
Yep.
I don't remember his name, but he lived out on the cliff over.
Mossman
That's it.
recently
Yeah.
died. He was
I don't
in the
know.
paper recently.
Was he a minister?
He was a Lutheran minister.
He lived up above the dam on that big bluff.
Oh, okay. And you have a book there, Jeanne. I've been sort of
Well,
interested.
this is
that
just,
some?
I just brought this, I don't know if this has nothing to do with the state hospital.
Oh,
She
But
was-
you asked about diagnosis of mental illness when I was
Oh.
in training.
uh-huh.
This is my psychiatric book from nurses training,
Oh,
and it lists all the illnesses that we've been talking about. And
uh-huh.
actually, schizophrenia was called dementia precox, and they had all different names for some of
Oh,
them.
sure.
But it was 1927, I think, book.
Oh, my goodness. So that book was
Yeah.
rather old when you went to training then, wasn't it? When did you go to
yeah.
training?
Well, that was
I
the
mean,
beginning of it. That was
Oh.
that was the first. I don't know how
the
many
first
times.
edition.
Yeah, I don't know
Uh-huh.
how many times it was copyrighted, but I just thought that's my
Yeah.
textbook.
Isn't that interesting? And then how the names of the different
Everything is
illnesses or the
bipolar
diagnoses.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
It's all
antidepressant
changed,
error and,
yeah.
and involutional psychosis, psychoneurosis,
Psychoneurosis. That was a double whammy then, wasn't it?
and oh gosh, some of the names have changed, but it's mental hygiene. You know, I just thought I didn't. I just meant to bring that to you to show it afterwards.
Yeah.
But
That's interesting. Okay, well,
You know, Rochester and Fergus Falls were always teaching hospitals. They were well staffed with instructors and social workers and whatnot for getting the nurses out of the general hospitals for was it 3 months?
I went to Rochester for 3 months. Yeah.
Training.
Mm-hmm. And Hastings did some of that, didn't they, or not?
Not for nurses.
Oh, not for
No.
For
nurses.
the psychiatric
Okay.
technicians, yes.
Oh, okay.
And we had LPNs for a
Yeah,
while.
that's right.
Hastings
LPNs.
LPNs, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I was. That's what I
We
was
had them for
thinking of.
a while up on receiving unit.
yeah.
Mhm. Well, this has been very nice visiting with all of you, and I want to thank you very much for coming in and sharing your stories with us about your time working and being at the Hastings State Hospital.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us, and be sure to continue. This is a series, and there will be more to come. Thank you.